"She's performing," Dr. Philip Crane said, capping his pen without looking at the girl screaming in the hospital bed. "Give her the sedative and document it as another anxiety episode." The nurse beside him didn't move. Crane turned, annoyed. "Did I stutter?" 3 feet away, 22-year-old Ellie Weston was clawing at her own pillow, her spine arching backward, her mouth open in a sound that didn't belong in a hospital. It belonged in a war zone. And the man responsible for her care had just walked out of the room. Before we go any further, if this story already has your blood boiling, hit that subscribe button right now and stay with me until the very end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to the beginning, because what happened inside Harborview Naval Medical Center is something nobody was supposed to find out. Claire Harmon had worked the night shift at Harborview Naval Medical Center for 5 years, and in that time she had learned to read a room the way other people read weather. She walked in every night at 11, clocked in without ceremony, and moved through the corridors like she belonged to the silence. Nobody asked about her background. Nobody asked why a nurse with her clinical precision was content to stay part-time, night shift, 5th floor, indefinitely. She didn't offer answers they didn't ask for. The 5th floor of Harborview's military wing had a reputation. Private rooms, high ceilings, the kind of institutional quiet that money bought. Patients here were not ordinary patients. They were the family members of generals, senators, decorated veterans, people whose names opened doors and whose complaints landed on the desks of hospital administrators before the ink was dry. Claire had watched the staff treat them accordingly. Extra attention during rounds, charts reviewed twice. Attending physicians who materialized from nowhere when the right name was on the admission form. Ellie Weston had arrived 3 weeks ago under the care of her father, General Douglas Weston, commander of the Eastern Naval District. The admitting diagnosis was exhaustion and sleep disruption. The girl was 22, a senior at Georgetown, honor roll, varsity swimmer, the kind of young woman who seemed to have everything organized. But something had come undone. Her father had noticed it first, the way she flinched at sounds that weren't there, the way she'd stopped eating, the way she called him at 2 in the morning saying she couldn't breathe. Harborview had given her a private room and a specialist. Dr. Philip Crane, head of neurology, had examined her on day 1 and written a single word in the margin of his notes: psychosomatic. Everything that followed had been filtered through that word. Claire had not been assigned to Ellie Weston. That was the first thing to understand. She was covering for a colleague who'd called out sick on a Tuesday, and the charge nurse had reshuffled the floor assignments at 11:15. By 11:30, Claire had introduced herself to every patient on her new rotation. Ellie was the last room on the left. The girl was sitting upright in bed with her knees pulled to her chest and her eyes fixed on the wall. She didn't look psychotic. She didn't look like someone performing anxiety for attention. She looked like someone waiting for something bad to happen and trying very hard to be ready for it. "I'm Claire," she said, stopping at the foot of the bed. "I'm covering tonight. Do you need anything before I start my rounds?" Ellie looked at her the way people look at strangers they've already decided not to trust. "No." "Okay." Claire made a note on the tablet and turned to leave. "They changed my pillow again today," Ellie said. Claire turned back. "Did they?" "3rd time. Doesn't matter. It still happens." "What happens?" The girl pulled her knees tighter. "You'll hear it soon enough." Claire did not push. She had learned long ago that people told you what mattered when they were ready, not when you were. She finished her rounds, restocked the supply cart, checked vitals on 4 other patients, and was updating medication logs at the nurse's station when the sound came at 2:47 in the morning. It started low, a trapped, pressurized sound, like something trying to escape through the wrong exit. Then it broke open, full, raw, uncontrolled. Claire was moving before her brain had finished registering what she'd heard. 2 other nurses appeared in the corridor. Marcus, a broad-shouldered man with 3 years on the floor, stopped short at the doorway and pressed himself against the frame. Tanya, who was new and still carrying that first-year tension in her shoulders, put both hands over her mouth. Claire went past both of them. Ellie Weston was arching backward against the bed rails, both hands locked around the pillow beneath her head, her face white, her eyes open and rolling with something that was not performance and was not pretending. The monitors were screaming alongside her, heart rate climbing, blood pressure spiking, oxygen dropping with a patience that felt like threat. "Get Dr. Crane on call," Claire said without turning around. "He's already been paged 3 times this week," Marcus said from the doorway. "Page him again." She moved to the bedside, not reaching for the girl's wrists, not trying to restrain what the body was doing. She pulled the chart with one hand and talked to Ellie with the other. "Ellie, look at me." The girl's eyes found hers. Something in them was still there, still present, fighting to stay connected to the room. "I need you to sit up. Can you push yourself up?" "It's the pillow," Ellie gasped through the pain. "It's always the pillow," I told them. I told them every single time. "I know. Sit up. Come toward me." The moment Ellie's head lifted off the pillow, the sound changed. The arching stopped. The monitors began their slow return to acceptable numbers. Ellie collapsed forward into Claire's arms, shaking so hard it felt like her bones were arguing with each other. "You're okay," Claire said, holding her weight. "Keep breathing, right here." Dr. Philip Crane arrived 11 minutes later. His hair was damp, his scrubs fresh, and his expression carried the particular weariness of a man who had been correct about a diagnosis for 3 weeks and was running out of patience with the evidence to the contrary. He looked at the monitors first, then at Ellie, now sitting upright against the raised mattress, then at Claire, whom he had never seen before. "Who are you?" "Claire Harmon, covering for Chen tonight." He nodded once and moved to Ellie's bedside with his penlight. "Ellie, eyes open. Follow the light." "I keep telling you," Ellie said, her voice hoarse and shaking. "It happens when my head touches the pillow, every single time." "We've changed your pillow 3 times." "I know. We've run every test available. MRI, CT scan, full blood panel, lumbar puncture. Every result has come back clean." "Then something is wrong with the tests." Crane capped his pen. "Pain without physiological origin is still real pain, Ellie. That's what psychosomatic means. We're not saying you're inventing this." "But you are." Her voice was very quiet. "You're saying my body is inventing it." "I'm saying grief and stress can present as—" "My mother died 8 months ago." Ellie cut him off with a steadiness that surprised the room. "I know what grief feels like. This is not grief. This is something in that pillow." Crane looked at the pillow. White cotton case, standard issue, the same as every other pillow on every other bed on this floor. "I'll order a sleep study," he said, "and I want to increase the Ativan dose tonight. More sedation isn't going to fix this. It will help you rest." "I've been sedated twice this week. I still woke up screaming." Ellie's eyes went to the pillow and stayed there, the way eyes go to a thing they are afraid of but cannot stop watching. "Nobody believes me." Crane turned from the bed, which was itself an answer. He said something to Tanya about medication adjustments. He said something to Marcus about updated documentation. He did not say anything to Claire, who was still standing at Ellie's side with her hand around the girl's wrist, counting a pulse that was still running 8 beats too fast. He left. Tanya and Marcus followed. The room settled back into its expensive, monitored quiet. Claire pulled a chair to the bedside and sat down. Ellie looked at her. "You don't have to stay." "I know." "Your shift doesn't require it." "Correct." Ellie studied her for a moment. "Why are you staying?" "Because you said something that hasn't been answered yet," Claire said. "You said it's always the pillow. I want to understand what you mean." Something shifted in Ellie's face. Not hope exactly. Something more careful than hope. The way a person looks when they have been disappointed so many times, that they have started building walls against optimism itself. The second my head touches it, Ellie said slowly, it's like something presses into the back of my skull. Not sharp, pressure, deep pressure, like something is drilling inward from the outside. And then the pain explodes and I can't think through it. I can't talk through it. She stopped. They've changed the pillow 3 times. Different case, different foam. Doesn't matter. It always starts the same way. Has anyone examined the pillows before disposing of them? Ellie blinked. What do you mean? When they replaced the pillow, where did the old one go? I don't know. They just took it. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I believe you. Ellie's breath caught. I believe the pain is real. I believe it starts with the pillow, and I think that's worth taking seriously. Claire stood up. Get some sleep sitting up if you can. I'll check on you in an hour. She walked to the door, then paused. The pillow they replaced today, do you know who changed it? Ellie thought. The housekeeping man who comes at 6 in the morning, and someone from supply brought a new one in the afternoon. I didn't see who. Claire nodded and stepped into the corridor. The hallway was empty. The overnight fluorescents hummed at their usual frequency. 3 doors down, a patient was snoring with the commitment of a man who had never had trouble sleeping in his life. Claire stood at the supply cart and looked at the door to room 517 and thought about weight. She had lifted thousands of pillows in her career. Standard hospital-issue memory foam ran between 3 and 4 pounds. She had carried Ellie's pillow twice tonight, once repositioning it, and once when she had moved it away from the girl to get better access to the monitors. Both times she had registered something, not dramatically, not enough to stop and question in the middle of a crisis, but enough to sit in the back of her awareness like a detail that had not been filed correctly. The pillow was heavier than it should be. She went back to the room. Ellie was asleep, sitting upright, her head tilting against the raised mattress, her breathing finally even. The pillow sat in the corner of the bed where Claire had left it. She picked it up with both hands and held it at arm's length and paid attention this time. Her hands were not wrong. This pillow was carrying more weight than the foam accounted for. She squeezed the sides, uniform softness, no obvious anomaly. She ran her fingers along all 4 seams. Intact, professionally stitched, no signs of tampering visible to the eye. She pressed her palms flat against the front, and then the back, and then the center, moving in a slow grid the way she had been trained to palpate an abdomen for masses, and on the 3rd pass her right palm felt it. A small, hard resistance beneath the foam, not at the surface but positioned deep enough that only pressure from above, from a head pressing down with the weight of sleep, would force contact. Claire's pulse did not race. It steadied. She had been in situations where panic was the wrong response, and she had trained herself out of it a long time ago, in places she did not discuss. She carried the pillow to the supply closet 2 doors down, turned on the overhead light, and locked the door behind her. From the cart, she took trauma shears in a biohazard bag. She laid the pillow on the metal shelf, positioned the shear blade against the bottom seam, and cut. The foam separated cleanly. She pulled the opening apart with both hands and reached inside. Her fingers closed around something small, hard, and geometric. She pulled it out and held it under the light. It was a device the size of a large watch battery, housed in matte black casing, with 2 thin, pressure-sensitive prongs extending from the bottom face. She had never seen one in a hospital context. She had seen one before, in a different context entirely, in a different part of her life, and the recognition hit her low in the stomach, like a door opening into a room she had closed years ago. She reached back into the foam, found a second one, then a third, positioned at a different depth, angled to engage at a slightly different point of pressure. 3 devices, distributed across the pillow's core, calibrated so that any head pressing down with sleeping weight would trigger at least 2 of them simultaneously. This was not improvised. This was engineered. She photographed everything with her phone before she touched anything else. She photographed the pillow. She photographed the devices in situ and then separately. She photographed the precision of their placement. Then she bagged each one individually and sealed the biohazard bag and stood in the supply closet alone with what she was now holding. Ellie Weston had not been imagining her pain. She had not been grieving herself into seizures. She had been assaulted, repeatedly, methodically, every time she lay her head down to sleep, by a device no routine inspection would catch, no standard pillow change would fix, because the device was already in the replacement before it arrived in the room. Someone with technical knowledge had built this. Someone with access to the hospital's supply chain had installed it. And someone had done it 3 times, in 3 different pillows, over 3 weeks. The supply closet door opened. Claire spun. Nora Banks stood in the doorway. Nora was the day shift charge nurse, 50 years old, 17 years at Harborview, the kind of institutional memory that knew where every skeleton was filed and had learned not to ask. She was not supposed to be here at 3 in the morning. Her face, when she saw what was on the shelf, went through several expressions very quickly, and not one of them was shock. "You need to put that back," Nora said. "Look at what I found." "I see what you found. Put it back." "Nora, someone put electronic pressure devices inside that girl's pillow. She's been screaming for 3 weeks, and this is why." "Keep your voice down." Nora stepped inside and pulled the door mostly shut behind her. Her hands were trembling slightly, and she was working hard not to let them show. "You don't understand what you're looking at." "I understand exactly what I'm looking at." "No." Nora's voice dropped to something tight and careful. "You understand the object. You don't understand the situation. Ellie Weston is General Weston's daughter. General Weston funds 40% of this wing's operating budget through the defense research agreements his office oversees. If something happened to his daughter inside this hospital, something did happen to her. That's the point. If it becomes public that something happened to her, this hospital doesn't survive the investigation. This wing closes. 43 staff members lose their jobs. The patients in these rooms lose their care." Nora looked at the biohazard bag in Claire's hands like it was a grenade. "Whatever this is, it gets handled internally, quietly. The devices get removed. The girl gets better. Nobody talks. And whoever put them there goes home." Nora said nothing. "Nora, whoever built these had technical knowledge. Whoever installed them had supply chain access. This didn't happen once. It happened 3 times. 3 separate pillows. That's not a prank. That's a program. Claire, 3 weeks. She has been screaming 3 weeks and 3 nights, and nobody checked the one thing she kept telling them to check." Claire's voice did not rise. It went the other direction, dropping into something flat and controlled that was somehow worse than shouting. "I'm not putting this back." Nora stared at her for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Dr. Crane. Call the police. This is an internal matter. This is assault. Call the police." Nora was already dialing. Her eyes did not leave Claire's face. "Security to the 5th floor," she said into the phone, her voice steady and quiet and final. "Supply closet adjacent to 517. We have a staff member acting outside scope. Code internal." Claire looked at Nora Banks, a woman she had worked beside for 5 years, and understood that Nora was not a villain. Nora was something worse. Nora was a person who knew exactly what was right and had decided that right was too expensive. Claire picked up the biohazard bag and walked past her into the corridor. She was halfway to the elevator when the door at the far end of the hall opened, and Security Chief Ben Morrow came through it. He was moving with an urgency that did not match a routine code internal call. He had his radio out, and his expression was already arranged into something predetermined. The look of a man who had been waiting for this moment and had decided what he was going to say in it before it arrived. Claire stopped walking. She looked at Morrow. She looked at the speed with which he had arrived. 3 minutes since Nora's call, from a security station on the ground floor. She thought about the camera in the corridor outside room 517 that she had noticed earlier, tilted 7 degrees further left than its housing indicated it should be. Ben Morrow had not been called to the 5th floor. Ben Morrow had been watching the 5th floor. "Miss Harmon," he said, reaching her in 8 strides, "I'm going to need you to hand me that bag and come with me." Claire's right hand tightened on the bag. Her left hand dropped to her scrubs pocket, where her phone was, where the photographs were, time-stamped and already uploaded to cloud storage 30 seconds after she took them. Whatever happened next, the photographs existed. Whatever happened next, 3 small devices in a biohazard bag had already been documented in a way that could not be unbagged. She looked at Ben Morrow and said 4 words. "Show me your credentials." He blinked. Whatever he had expected, it was not that. And in the half-second that his face did something unplanned, Claire Harmon understood that the security chief of Harborview Naval Medical Center was not going to be able to answer that question the way she needed him to, and that Ellie Weston's 3 weeks of screaming had just become something considerably more dangerous than a hospital scandal. She was still holding the bag when the elevator at the end of the corridor opened and a woman stepped out wearing civilian clothes and the particular expression of someone who had been moving fast toward this exact room for longer than tonight. The woman looked at Claire, then at Morrow, then at the bag. "Don't give that to him," she said. Morrow turned. The woman held up credentials that she did not lower until he had read them twice. "Special Agent Diana Cole," she said, "Naval Criminal Investigative Service. And I've been waiting 3 weeks for someone on this floor to do exactly what this nurse just did." Ben Morrow did not move for 3 full seconds. That was the tell. A man with nothing to hide moves immediately, argues, demands to see the credentials up close. Morrow stood perfectly still, and in that stillness Claire read everything she needed to know about why he had arrived on this floor 3 minutes after a quiet, internal security call. Agent Cole did not lower her credentials. She held them at chest height, patient and absolute, until Morrow finally stepped back 1 pace, which was not compliance, but was close enough for now. "This is a hospital matter," Morrow said. "Internal security protocol." This stopped being a hospital matter the moment someone installed military-grade pressure devices inside a patient's pillow. Cole's eyes moved to Claire. "You're the nurse who found them." Claire Harmon. "You photographed everything before you touched anything." It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Where are the photos?" "Cloud backup, time-stamped, already there." Something crossed Cole's face that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. She looked at Morrow again. "I need this floor cleared of non-essential staff, now, and I need you to stay exactly where I can see you. You don't have authority to..." "I have a federal warrant that covers every room, every supply closet, and every personnel file in this building." Cole pulled a folded document from her jacket and held it up without offering it. "You want to keep talking? Or you want to call your lawyer?" Morrow went quiet. The kind of quiet that is not surrender, but is the decision to wait for a better moment. Cole turned back to Claire. "Walk with me." They moved to the conference room at the end of the hall, the one the attending physicians use for family meetings. Cole closed the door. She did not sit down. Neither did Claire. "How long have you been at Harborview?" Cole asked. 5 years. "Part-time nights?" "Yes. With your background, that's a choice, not a limitation." Cole said it the way someone says a thing they already know the answer to, testing not for information, but for honesty. Claire looked at her steadily. "People ask fewer questions about the part-time night nurse." "That was the idea." Cole pulled out her phone, opened a photograph, turned it around. "Recognize this?" Claire looked at the image, a device identical to the one she had just pulled from Ellie's pillow, but this one was photographed in what appeared to be an evidence bag with a federal case number printed on the label. "Where did you get that?" "Bethesda Naval Hospital. 14 months ago. Patient was 19 years old. daughter of Rear Admiral Patricia Sung, admitted for sleep disturbance and mood instability, developed unexplained pain episodes, diagnosed with conversion disorder after 6 weeks of testing, discharged. Her father pulled his oversight role from a defense procurement review 3 days after she left. Cole put the phone away. The device was found in the mattress seam during a routine room turnover after discharge. Too late to connect it to anything, the case went cold. Claire felt the floor shift slightly beneath her. Not literally, the kind of shift that happens when a pattern you suspected becomes a pattern confirmed. Ellie is not the first. Ellie is the fourth that we know of. The room held that number for a moment. 3 before her, Cole continued, all young women, all daughters of senior military officers, all admitted to military-adjacent medical facilities for evaluation. All developed symptoms that got progressively worse during their stay and resolved or diminished after discharge. All of their fathers pulled back from some form of financial oversight, contract review, or budget audit within 30 days of the admission. She paused. The first one we can't definitively connect. The second one we have circumstantial. The third one, we have a partial device in a shipping manifest that got buried in a paperwork flood. Ellie is the first one where we have intact evidence, chain of custody, and a witness who documented everything before the scene was contaminated. Who builds these? Claire asked. Someone with electronic engineering background and access to pressure sensor technology that's used in military field equipment. The design is adapted from a legitimate device used in field medicine to detect weight load on stretchers. Cole watched Claire's face. Someone who knows military medical supply chains from the inside. Gerald Nash. Cole went very still. Where did you hear that name? I didn't hear it. Claire set the biohazard bag on the table between them. I recognize the casing design, the matte black housing on the pressure prongs. That's a Nash Defense Technologies proprietary finish. I've seen it before. When? Claire's jaw tightened. A long time ago, in a different capacity. Cole stared at her for a long moment. You're going to tell me everything you know about Nash before this conversation ends. I'll tell you what I know. What I know is limited and old. Old is better than nothing. We've been building a case against Nash Defense Technologies for 2 years, and we keep hitting walls because someone inside the military procurement system keeps redirecting our requests. Cole leaned forward. Someone with enough rank to make paperwork disappear and enough influence to keep NCIS investigators from getting traction. Who? That's the question we can't answer yet. Cole straightened. Which is why I need you. You found the devices. You have the photographs. You are the chain of custody right now. If this goes to a federal grand jury, you are the witness that makes the physical evidence admissible. I'm a part-time night nurse who cut open a hospital pillow without authorization. You're a nurse who identified a threat to her patient and preserved evidence under pressure. Any competent prosecutor will frame it exactly that way. Cole's phone buzzed. She looked at it and her expression shifted. Morrow just made a call from the stairwell. To who? We're about to find out. Do not leave this floor. Do not give that bag to anyone who doesn't show you federal credentials first. She moved to the door. And Claire, whatever you did before this, whatever reason you had for staying invisible here for 5 years, I need you visible now. Can you do that? Claire looked at the biohazard bag on the table. She thought about Ellie Weston's spine arching off the mattress. She thought about a 19-year-old girl at Bethesda whose father pulled his oversight role 3 days after she was discharged. She thought about a number. 4. The ones they knew about. Yes, she said. Cole left. Claire picked up the bag and walked back toward 517, and that was when she saw it. Nora Banks was standing at the nurse's station with her phone pressed to her ear and her back to the corridor, speaking in a low, rapid voice that stopped the moment she registered Claire's footsteps. Nora turned around with an expression that had been rearranged hastily into something neutral, and the rearrangement was not quite finished. Who are you calling? Claire asked. Charge nurse at the main desk. Routine handoff. At 3:15 in the morning, Nora set her phone face down on the desk. Claire, listen to me. I've worked here 17 years. I have a son in college and a mortgage and a mother in assisted living. Whatever you found in that room, whatever you think it means, I know what it means. You know what the object is. You don't know what happens to people who turn it into a federal case. Nora's voice dropped. The last nurse who filed a complaint against this administration was Karen Del Vecchio. You remember Karen. Claire remembered Karen Del Vecchio. She had been a meticulous, experienced nurse who had documented medication irregularities in the military wing 18 months ago and submitted a formal report to hospital administration. Karen now worked at a walk-in clinic in suburban Maryland, making 40% less than she had made at Harborview, and she didn't talk about why. Karen didn't have federal backup, Claire said, and you think you do? A woman you met 20 minutes ago with a badge? Nora shook her head. They will use you and discard you, the same way they discarded Karen, the same way they'll discard that girl in 517 the moment her father's name becomes inconvenient. Claire looked at Nora Banks, a woman she had genuinely respected, and felt something sad and final settle between them. The devices in that pillow are connected to 3 other cases, Nora. 3 other girls, in 3 other hospitals. This isn't a hospital administrative problem. This is a federal criminal operation. Nora's face went through something complicated. How do you know that? Because Agent Cole told me, and because I recognized the device. You recognized? Nora stopped. The confusion on her face was real. How would you recognize a device like that? Claire had not intended to say this tonight. She had not intended to say it ever. But the weight of 5 years of careful invisibility was sitting on her chest like the pillow on the shelf, heavier than it had any right to be, and she was done carrying it quietly. Before I was a nurse here, she said, I was an Army Nurse Corps captain attached to a Joint Special Operations Medical Unit in Afghanistan. We ran a field hospital outside Kandahar for 14 months. Nash Defense Technologies held the supply contract for our medical equipment. She paused. Gerald Nash personally visited our unit 3 times. The 3rd time, 2 of our soldiers died from equipment failure. Pressure monitors on field stretchers that should have triggered at critical weight thresholds. They didn't trigger. The failure was traced to a design modification Nash had made to cut production costs. Modification he hadn't disclosed to the military. Modification he'd falsified testing records to conceal. Nora's face was completely still. I filed a report, a formal report with documentation, witness statements, equipment serial numbers. I submitted it through the proper chain of command. Claire's voice stayed level the way it always stayed level when she talked about things that had cost her something irreplaceable. It was reviewed and classified, and I was told the investigation was ongoing. I was offered an early discharge. I took it. She looked at Nora. The investigation was never completed. Gerald Nash kept his contracts. I became a civilian and learned to be quiet. The corridor hummed with the sound of machines keeping people alive. Until tonight, Nora said softly. Until tonight. Nora picked up her phone from the desk. She held it for a moment, looking at it the way people look at things they have been using as shields when they realize the shield has a crack in it. Then she set it back down without dialing. The call I made, she said, it went to Dr. Crane's personal line, not the charge desk. I know. I'm sorry. Claire nodded once, an acknowledgement, not an absolution. She walked past Nora toward 517. Ellie was awake. She was sitting exactly as Claire had left her, upright, knees drawn up, but her eyes were open and tracking the door with the alertness of someone who had been listening to the sounds of the corridor and drawing conclusions. Something's happening, Ellie said. Yes. Is it about the pillow? Claire pulled the chair back to the bedside. I found something inside it, something that was causing your pain. Ellie's breath went out in a long, unsteady release, like a person who had been holding tension in their lungs for 3 weeks and finally got permission to let it go. I told them every single time. I know you did. They thought I was, her voice cracked. My dad thought I was falling apart the same way my mom did before she died. He was so careful with me, so gentle, like I was made of something breakable. Ellie pressed her palms against her eyes. I kept thinking, what if they're right? What if I am imagining it? What if grief actually does this to a person? Grief doesn't do this to a person, Claire said. Someone did this to you, deliberately, and we're going to find out who. Ellie's hands came down from her face. Her eyes were wet but clear. The person who put it there, do you know who it was? Not yet. But you have an idea. Claire looked at her carefully. Ellie Weston was 22 years old and had been systematically hurt and systematically disbelieved for 3 weeks, and she was sitting upright, asking sharp questions with red eyes and a steady voice. She was not fragile. She had never been fragile. She had been treated as fragile by people who found that useful. I have a direction, Claire said. That's enough for now. The door opened. Ben Morrow stood in the frame, and behind him was Dr. Philip Crane, dressed now in a suit jacket over his scrubs, which meant he had gone to his office before coming here, which meant he had done something in that office before coming here. Miss Harmon, Crane said, I need you to step outside. I'm with my patient. Miss Weston is stable. I need to discuss your conduct tonight, which has been... My conduct saved your patient from another episode, Claire said. You're welcome to discuss it with Agent Cole from NCIS, who is currently on this floor executing a federal warrant. Crane's mouth opened and closed once. What warrant? You should ask Ben. Claire watched Morrow's face. He's been making calls. I imagine he knows more about the warrant than you do. Something happened between Crane and Morrow in that moment. A glance that lasted less than a second, but carried the entire weight of people who have been managing a shared problem and suddenly find themselves managing it separately. It was the glance of people who are about to start calculating whether the other one is a liability. Ellie saw it too. Claire knew she saw it by the way the girl's chin lifted. Dad, Ellie's voice cut through the room clearly. I need my dad here. Miss Weston, Crane started. General Weston is in Washington. We don't need to. I need my father here. Ellie reached for her phone on the bedside table. Right now, tonight, if you try to take this phone before I call him, I will be telling a federal agent that you did that, and I will be very specific about who was in this room and what they said. She looked at Crane with the eyes of someone who had been scared long enough to get angry. Are we clear? Crane did not answer. He looked at Claire instead, with an expression that was trying to be professional and landing somewhere in the neighborhood of afraid. Get out of my patient's room, Claire said. He got out. Morrow followed. The door closed. Ellie was already dialing. The phone rang twice before a man's voice answered, rough with sleep and immediately alert. The voice of someone who had spent 30 years training himself to be functional the moment a phone rang in the dark. Ellie, what's wrong? Dad. Her voice broke on the word just once and then steadied. I need you to come, and I need you to call whoever you call when something is very wrong, because something is very wrong. And a nurse named Claire Harmon found the proof. She paused. And Dad, I was right. I was right the whole time. General Douglas Weston did not ask for details. He did not ask her to calm down or explain slowly or wait until morning. He said 3 words. I'm on my way. He was at Harborview in 94 minutes. Claire had counted. But the call Morrow made from the stairwell had reached its destination in far less time than that. And by the time General Weston's car pulled into the hospital drive, 2 things had already happened that nobody on the 5th floor had anticipated. The hospital's head of administration, Gerald Nash's contract liaison at Harborview, had remotely accessed the supply chain database and deleted 4 months of requisition records. And someone had removed the security footage from the camera outside room 517, replacing it with a looped segment from 48 hours earlier, showing an empty corridor and the ordinary darkness of a night when no one was screaming. Claire did not know about the deleted records yet. She did not know about the footage yet. What she knew, standing in the corridor outside Ellie's room, while Agent Cole spoke in rapid, quiet sentences into her phone 20 feet away, was that Ben Morrow had not been seen on the floor for the last 20 minutes, which meant he was somewhere she couldn't see him, which meant he was doing something she needed to know about. She started moving toward the stairwell. Cole looked up from her call, tracked Claire's direction, and spoke one word into the phone. Hold. Then to Claire, "Where are you going?" "Morrow's been off this floor for 20 minutes. I have someone watching the exits." "He's not going to the exits." Claire pushed open the stairwell door. "He's going to the server room. 2nd floor, east wing. That's where the supply chain records are locally backed up." Cole was already off her other call. "How do you know where the server room is?" Claire looked back at her over the stairwell door. "Because when I took this job," she said, "the first thing I did was learn every room in this building." And she went through the door before Cole could ask the next question. Because some things were better explained after the damage was stopped than before it began. And Claire Harmon had never been the kind of person who waited for permission when a patient's evidence was about to disappear into the dark. The stairwell door had not fully closed behind Claire before she heard footsteps below her, moving fast, 2 floors down, the particular rhythm of someone who believed they were alone. She took the stairs without using the railing, her weight distributed forward, her footsteps nearly silent. 5 years of night shifts had taught her how to move through a building without announcing herself. The training from before that had taught her how to move through a building when announcing herself could get someone killed. She hit the 2nd floor landing and pushed through the door into the east wing corridor. It was darker here than the patient floors, the overnight lights reduced to the minimum required by code. Storage, administration, the long institutional backbone of the hospital that patients never saw and staff tried to forget existed. The server room was at the end of the east corridor, behind a door marked Network Infrastructure, Key card access only. Claire had never needed to enter it. She had needed to know where it was, which was different. She had needed to know the access protocols, the backup systems, the name of the IT contractor who serviced it on the 3rd Tuesday of every month. These were the things she had cataloged quietly in her first year at Harborview, while everyone assumed she was memorizing medication dosage charts. The door was open, not fully, 3 inches, maybe 4, enough to tell her she was right, and also enough to tell her she had maybe 30 seconds before whatever was happening inside that room finished happening. She pushed it open. Ben Morrow stood at a terminal with a key card that was not his own, and an expression that finished transforming from focused to cornered in the half-second it took him to register who had come through the door. His right hand was still on the keyboard. On the screen behind him, a deletion progress bar sat at 63%. "Step away from the terminal," Claire said. "You don't have authority to be in this room." "Neither do you. That's not your key card." His jaw tightened. "You need to turn around and go back upstairs. I need you to step away from the terminal and put your hands where I can see them." Morrow was built like a man who had spent 20 years making other people feel small, and he pulled that history into his posture now, all of it, the full architecture of intimidation. He took one step toward her and said, "You're a part-time nurse who has been causing problems since 11 o'clock tonight, and when this is over, you will never work in a medical facility in this country again. Walk away. Last chance." Claire did not move. 63%, she said, glancing at the screen. "Whatever you're deleting, 2/3 of it is still there. Step away now and maybe that matters. Stay where you are and I start screaming loud enough that every NCIS agent on this floor finds this room in under a minute." Something shifted in his face. The calculation running behind his eyes was visible, the way calculations are visible in people who are used to winning them, right up until the moment they aren't. He stepped away from the terminal. Cole came through the door 40 seconds later with another agent behind her. A man Claire hadn't seen before, younger, moving with the particular efficiency of someone who had been briefed thoroughly. Cole took one look at the screen, one look at Morrow, and said something quietly into her radio that Claire didn't catch. Then she looked at Claire. "How did you know the exact room?" "I know this building." "That's not an answer. It's the answer I have right now." Cole held her gaze for a moment, then turned to her colleague. "Secure the terminal. I want a forensic team in here before that deletion is reversed or progressed." She looked at Morrow. "Sit down." "I want a lawyer." "Sit down first, lawyer second." Cole pulled out her phone and typed something fast. "You just attempted to destroy evidence under active federal warrant. That's obstruction. Combined with what we already have, you are going to want a very good lawyer, and you are going to want to start thinking about what you can offer us before the people who sent you here decide you're more useful to them as a closed mouth than an open one." She paused. "Because those people will make that decision, and they'll make it soon." Morrow sat down. He sat the way men sit when they are trying to figure out how much time they have left, and coming up with an answer they don't like. General Douglas Weston arrived at Harborview at 4:41 in the morning. Claire knew the exact moment because the temperature of the entire building changed. Not literally, the way a room changes when someone walks in who has spent 30 years commanding the kind of situations where the wrong decision kills people, and has internalized that weight so completely it radiates outward without effort. He came through the 5th-floor corridor with 2 aides and an expression that had been stripped of everything except the need to reach his daughter. He was 61 years old, gray-haired, broad-shouldered, still carrying himself with the physical precision of a man who had never quite left the field behind. He was also carrying something else, the particular guilt of a father who had believed the wrong people about his child. Claire met him at the door to 517. He looked at her the way people look at someone they've been told to trust and aren't yet sure they do. "You're the nurse." "Claire Harmon." "Agent Cole said you found the device." "Devices, 3 of them. Different depths, calibrated to engage at sleep-weight pressure." His face did not move, but something behind his eyes did. Something that looked like a man absorbing a blow he had been bracing for without knowing it. She was telling the truth the whole time. "Yes, sir." 3 weeks. He said it quietly, like a count against himself. "She told me something was wrong with the pillow on day 4. I sat with her for an hour and told her the doctors had checked everything and she needed to trust the process." He stopped. "I told my daughter to trust the process that was hurting her." Claire did not offer comfort. She had learned long ago that comfort in the wrong moment was a form of avoidance. "She wants to see you." He went in. Claire stayed in the corridor. Through the closed door she could hear nothing, which meant the building's walls were doing what they were built to do, give powerful people privacy. She was glad for it. Whatever happened in that room belonged to them. Cole appeared beside her. "I need you in the conference room, now." General Weston just arrived. His daughter is stable and has her father with her. What I'm about to tell you affects both of them, and I need you to hear it first. Cole's voice had something in it that Claire had not heard before. Not urgency. She had been urgent since the moment she stepped off the elevator. Something tighter than urgency. Something that came from a case getting bigger faster than expected. "Now, Claire." They went to the conference room. Cole's younger colleague was there, laptop open, a second agent Claire didn't recognize standing near the door. Cole closed it. "The deletion Morrow was running," Cole said. "It was 37% complete when you stopped it. Forensics recovered the remaining 63% intact, plus partial reconstruction of the deleted segment." She turned the laptop around. 4 months of supply chain requisitions for the military wing. And in those 4 months, 11 separate orders for pillow inventory, delivered by the same contractor. Harborview uses one linen supplier. They switched to a secondary supplier for the military wing 8 months ago. Override authorization signed by the hospital's director of procurement. She paused. The secondary supplier is a subsidiary of Nash Defense Technologies. The room held that for a moment. The pillows were preloaded, Claire said. Not all of them. The devices require specific installation. They're not sewn into standard inventory. But the supplier had access to the military wing's patient manifest, updated weekly. When a target patient was admitted, a modified pillow was included in the wing's standard linen delivery that week, flagged with a room number in the internal tracking system as a standard replacement cycle. Cole's finger moved to a column of numbers on the screen. Ellie Weston's room number appears in the system 4 times in 3 weeks. 4 deliveries. 3 confirmed pillow exchanges by housekeeping. We're looking for the 4th. It was already in the room when I arrived tonight, Claire said. The one I cut open. Which means the installation happened earlier that day, before your shift. Cole straightened. The person who placed the room number in the delivery manifest each week had to have access to both the patient admission system and the linen logistics portal. That requires dual system access. There are 9 people at Harborview with dual access. 3 of them are administrators. 1 is Dr. Crane, 1 is Morrow, and 1, Cole looked at her directly, is a name you're going to recognize. She turned the laptop fully around. The name on the screen was Raymond Kowalski, Director of Military Wing Procurement, former Senior Logistics Officer, Nash Defense Technologies, retired from the company 4 years ago to take the Harborview position. Claire looked at the name and felt a specific, cold recognition that had nothing to do with the hospital. I know him, she said. Cole nodded slowly. We thought you might. He was the logistics officer on our supply contract in Kandahar. He was the person who signed off on the modified pressure monitors. When I filed my report, he was interviewed and cleared. Claire's voice was very controlled. He was cleared because someone above him in the chain of command decided the investigation was inconvenient. We know who cleared him. Then you know more than I do. We know now. Cole closed the laptop. The person who buried your report in 2014 was Brigadier General Theodore Marsh. At the time, Marsh was overseeing military medical supply contracts for the entire eastern region. Nash Defense Technologies was his largest contractor. The relationship between Marsh and Nash went back 15 years. She paused. General Marsh retired from active duty 2 years ago. He currently serves on the board of 3 defense contracting firms. 2 of them have active contracts with Harborview Naval Medical Center. Claire sat down, not because she needed to, but because the architecture of what she was hearing required a moment to hold its full shape. 10 years. She had filed that report 10 years ago. 2 soldiers had died. She had been told the investigation was ongoing and offered a way out and taken it because staying had started to feel like being buried from the inside. And the thread she had pulled on 3 weeks ago in a supply closet with trauma shears was connected, had always been connected, to the thread that had unraveled her military career a decade before. Marsh, she said, where is he now? That's the problem. Cole's voice was careful in the way that meant what she was about to say had significant consequences. Marsh is currently the civilian liaison to the Joint Chiefs Committee overseeing military medical facility budget reviews. He has access to every financial audit scheduled in the next 18 months across 11 military-adjacent hospitals. And his committee has been quietly redirecting resources away from any facility facing a performance review. She paused. He is also General Douglas Weston's direct superior in the committee structure. The silence in the room was different from the silence that had come before it. This one had weight and direction. Weston's audit review, Claire said, was scheduled to begin in 6 weeks. It covered Nash Defense Technologies supply contracts at 4 facilities, including Harborview. Estimated irregularities under review, $42 million. Cole looked at the door. General Weston is in that room right now with his daughter, who has just been told she was deliberately hurt. He does not yet know that the man who authorized that hurt is the man sitting one level above him on the committee structure he trusts. Claire stood up. You have to tell him. I'm going to tell him. I'm telling you first because you're going to be in that room when I do, and I need you to understand the full picture before he asks you questions I haven't answered yet. Cole's eyes were direct and without apology. He's going to ask how you recognize the device. He's going to ask about Kandahar. He's going to ask why a nurse with your background has been working part-time nights at his daughter's hospital for 5 years. And when those questions get answered in front of him, I need him to hear them in a way that makes him trust you. Because what comes next requires him to make a decision that goes against 30 years of institutional loyalty. And the only person in this building he's going to trust to tell him the truth is the one who already proved it once tonight. Claire looked at her. You knew who I was before tonight. We've been building this case for 2 years. Your report from Kandahar is in our file. Your employment at Harborview, your part-time status, your positioning on the military wing night shift. Cole's expression did not change. We weren't sure if you were here because you were watching Nash or because Nash was watching you. The implications of that landed exactly as intended. Which is it? We think you came here on instinct, Cole said. The same instinct that made you stay in Ellie Weston's room tonight instead of going home. We also think that someone in Nash's network flagged your employment at Harborview 8 months ago and has been monitoring your activity since. She paused. The camera outside 517 that was repositioned. That wasn't aimed at the room, Claire. It was aimed at the nurse's station where you spend most of your shift. Someone had been watching her for 8 months, moving through this building, doing her job, believing she was invisible, while a camera she had noticed without understanding pointed at her back every night. They were waiting to see if I'd find something, Claire said, or waiting for the right moment to make sure you didn't. Cole moved toward the door. Come with me. General Weston was standing when they entered 517, his hand on his daughter's shoulder, Ellie sitting up in bed with the particular stillness of someone who has cried recently and is holding the remainder with both hands. He looked at Cole first, then at Claire, and something in his face asked a question before his mouth did. What haven't you told me yet? He said. It was not phrased as a question. Claire had noticed that about people with real authority, the ones forged by years of situations where soft language cost lives. They stopped asking questions and started naming the shape of things. Cole spoke for 11 minutes. She laid it out precisely, without inflection, the way you give information to someone who needs it unfiltered to make a real decision. The devices, the supply chain, Nash Defense Technologies, Raymond Kowalski, the 4 girls before Ellie, the deleted records, Morrow in the server room, and finally, steadily, without pausing for the intake of breath she could see him taking, General Theodore Marsh. Weston did not interrupt. He did not move. He stood with his hand on his daughter's shoulder and listened to the architecture of a betrayal that went back 20 years and touched people he had trusted completely. And when Cole finished, he was quiet for almost 10 seconds, which in that room felt like a different kind of time entirely. Marsh signed off on the committee review schedule, he said finally. Yes. He set the timeline. He controlled which audits went forward and which ones were delayed pending resource availability. Yes. He's been running interference for Nash for how long? We believe a minimum of 12 years, possibly longer. Weston's hand tightened once on Ellie's shoulder and then released. He turned to look at Claire. And you filed a report about Nash in 2014? Yes, sir. And it went to Marsh's desk. I didn't know that at the time, but you know it now. Yes, sir. He looked at her for a long moment with the eyes of a man recalibrating, not distrusting, recalibrating, fitting a piece into a frame where it hadn't existed before. Why Harborview? Out of every hospital in this region. Claire gave him the truth. Because Cole had been right, this man would know a partial answer from a whole one, and the whole one was the only thing worth offering now. Because Nash's primary supply contracts run through 3 military-adjacent facilities on the East Coast. Harborview is the hub. Whatever he's doing operationally runs through the logistics systems here. I thought if I stayed close enough, long enough, something would surface. She paused. I didn't plan on it being your daughter's pillow. Weston looked at her for another long moment. Then he said the thing that Claire had not expected, the thing that cut through the procedure and the strategy and the years of careful positioning and landed somewhere undefended. She called me on day 4 and told me the pillow was wrong, he said, and I told her the doctors had checked it. His voice was even, but the evenness was costing him something. I told my daughter to trust the institution over her own body, because that's what I've done my entire career, and the institution had been lying to me for 12 years. He looked at Ellie. I'm sorry. Ellie reached up and put her hand over his. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The gesture said the thing that the situation required, which was not that it was fine, because it wasn't fine, but that they were still on the same side of it. Then she looked at Claire. What happens now? Claire opened her mouth to answer, but Cole's phone went off first. Cole looked at the screen, and her expression shifted with a speed that indicated the information was both expected and bad. She stepped to the door, spoke briefly, came back. Marsh knows, she said. Someone at the Pentagon flagged unusual NCIS activity at Harborview 40 minutes ago. It came through a communications channel that Marsh has access to. She looked at Weston directly. He's been in contact with Nash's legal team in the last 20 minutes. We have monitoring on both lines. She paused. And he's issued an administrative hold on the Harborview audit review, citing insufficient documentation, signed 22 minutes ago at 5:17 in the morning. 5:17, the same number as the room they were standing in. Claire noticed it and let it go. He's trying to freeze the investigation from above, Weston said. He's trying to freeze the audit. The criminal investigation is federal and outside his jurisdiction, but the audit creates the financial paper trail that ties Nash to the specific contracts. Without the audit proceeding, we have devices and supply chain records and a very good case against Morrow and Kowalski, but Nash himself stays clean. He's insulated by enough layers of subsidiary companies and signed-off paperwork that without the audit numbers, his lawyers walk him in 6 months. So we need the audit to proceed, Weston said. We need you to override the administrative hold, which you have the authority to do as the second-ranking officer on the committee. Cole's voice was precise, but it will be read as a direct challenge to Marsh's authority, and Marsh will respond, and when he responds, everything comes into the open. She paused. Every connection, every cover-up, every cleared investigation that should not have been cleared, including Kandahar. The room was quiet. Ellie's monitors beeped their steady rhythm, indifferent to the scale of what was being decided around them. Weston looked at his daughter, then at Claire, then at Cole. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out his phone. He dialed a number from memory and waited 2 rings. This is General Douglas Weston, he said when the line connected. I'm invoking Section 14 override on the Harborview audit hold. Effective immediately, authorization code Delta 7 Whiskey 9. Document it. A pause. I don't care what time it is. Document it now. He ended the call and put the phone back in his pocket. Cole was already typing. Her colleague by the door was on his radio. The machinery of a federal case shifting into a different gear was audible in the way that institutional machinery always was. Not in the sounds it made directly, but in the sudden purposefulness of everyone in contact with it. Claire stood in the room where a girl had screamed for 3 weeks and felt the precise moment when the weight of a 10-year-old injustice shifted direction. Not resolved, Not finished, not clean, but moving, finally, toward the place where truth had a chance of arriving before the people trying to bury it could get there first. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She looked at the screen. 4 words in a text message. No context, no signature. We know you're there. She showed it to Cole without a word. Cole read it, looked up, and said something Claire had not expected from a federal agent 2 hours into a breaking investigation. She said, "Good. Let them know." The text message sat on Claire's phone screen for 11 seconds before Cole took it and handed it to her colleague with instructions to trace the origin. Claire already knew the trace would come back to a burner or a redirected line. The people who had been running this operation for 12 years were not going to make a mistake as simple as a traceable phone number. The message was not intelligence. The message was a test. They wanted to see if she would flinch. She put her phone in her pocket and went back to work. The next 2 hours moved the way the hours before a controlled demolition move, with precision and a kind of held breath that everyone present could feel, but nobody named. Cole coordinated from the 5th floor conference room, which had become a temporary operations center with 3 laptops, 2 federal agents Claire hadn't met before, and a direct line to NCIS headquarters in Washington. Weston's override of the administrative hold had triggered a cascade of authorizations that came back faster than normal business hours would have allowed, which told Claire something about how long Cole had been positioning for this moment. At 6:15 in the morning, Raymond Kowalski arrived at Harborview for his regular shift and walked directly into 2 federal agents waiting at the procurement office door. Claire heard about it secondhand from Cole's colleague, who relayed it in the flat shorthand of someone reporting facts rather than drama. Kowalski had stopped walking. Kowalski had said, "I want a lawyer." Kowalski had then sat down on a chair in the hallway and said nothing further, which meant he was smart enough to know his position and experienced enough to understand that the first person to talk in a situation like this was the first person to give something away. Dr. Philip Crane arrived at 7, his regular start time, and found Agent Cole waiting outside his office with a warrant and a forensic team already inside. Claire learned this because Nora Banks told her, and Nora told her because Nora had been awake since 3 in the morning and had spent those hours doing something that clearly cost her significantly. She appeared at the nurse's station at 6:45 with a USB drive in dark circles and the expression of a person who has made a decision they cannot unmake and is holding steady with both hands. "Medical records," Nora said, setting the drive on the counter in front of Claire. 18 months. I pulled them last year when I started seeing a pattern I didn't understand. Patients in the military wing developing new symptoms within 48 hours of admission. Always the same symptom cluster: pain, insomnia, disorientation. Always the same trajectory, getting worse, not better, despite clean diagnostic results. I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself the cases weren't connected. She stopped. I told myself a lot of things that let me keep coming to work every day. Claire picked up the drive. "You documented this and kept it." "I kept it because part of me knew, and I did nothing because the other part of me was afraid." Nora met her eyes for the first time since the supply closet. The names on those records, 3 of them, before Ellie. "I'll get this to Cole." Nora nodded. She looked like someone who had put down something very heavy and was not yet sure if her arms remembered how to work without the weight. "Claire, what happened to the girls before, the ones who were discharged?" "They're alive," Claire said. "Cole's team is contacting their families." Nora exhaled. "Okay." She picked up a chart from the station, her hands steady, and walked back into the business of the floor like a woman who had decided that the only direction available was forward. Cole came for Claire at 7:30, not urgently, with the particular purposefulness of someone who has the next step mapped and needs a specific person for it. "Crane wants to talk," she said. "He's asking for you specifically." Claire looked up. Why me? Because you're the one who found the devices. Because you're the one who stopped Morrow. Because at this point, you're the one person in this building he's seen do something decisive without an institutional script behind her, and he's trying to figure out what kind of threat you are before he decides how much to cooperate. Cole paused. I want you in the room. Let him talk. Don't push. Just let him talk. They went to the administrative conference room on the 3rd floor, where Crane was sitting across from a federal agent with a coffee he hadn't touched and a lawyer on a phone call that had just ended. He looked older in the morning light, not in the way people look older when they're tired, but in the way they look older when something is being subtracted from them in real time. He looked at Claire when she sat down. You were covering for Chen. Yes. Random assignment. Yes. He turned his coffee cup in both hands. If it had been Chen's shift, none of this would have happened tonight. Claire said nothing. I mean that as an observation, not a threat. Crane set the cup down. I'm trying to understand the timeline. He looked at his lawyer, then back at Claire. I want you to know that I did not know what was in those pillows. Cole leaned forward slightly. Dr. Crane, I'm telling her, not you. His voice was controlled, but the control had a crack in it. I diagnosed Ellie Weston with psychosomatic disorder because that was the diagnosis that fit the evidence I was given. Clean scans, clean blood work, consistent emotional triggers. I've seen conversion disorder present exactly that way a dozen times. He paused. I was also told by administration that a prolonged inpatient stay was in the patient's best interest. That was communicated to me as clinical guidance. I understand now that it was not clinical guidance. Who communicated it? Cole asked. Grantham, the administration director. He framed it as a family request that General Weston wanted his daughter in the most supportive possible environment for as long as necessary. I had no reason to question it. Crane's voice dropped. I had no reason to question it because I was not looking for a reason. I had a diagnosis. I had administrative direction. I had a patient whose father was the most powerful man connected to this hospital. I made the comfortable choice. He looked at Claire directly. The same choice every other physician on this floor made, except that none of us found what you found because none of us looked. Claire looked at him steadily. The supply chain. Did you ever have oversight of what came into the military wing? No. Procurement was entirely administrative. I signed off on medical equipment orders, linen, furniture, standard room materials. That went through Kowalski's office. Did Kowalski ever discuss supply vendors with you? Once. Crane's hands stilled on the table. About 8 months ago, there was a vendor change for the military wing linens. Secondary supplier, better pricing, faster delivery cycle. He mentioned it in passing at an administrative meeting. I didn't think about it again until 30 minutes ago. He looked at his lawyer, then back at Cole. I'll cooperate fully. I want that on the record. I'll give you everything I have on the administrative directives I received, who issued them, when, and in what context. Cole nodded once at the agent beside her, who opened a laptop. Start from the beginning. Claire got up quietly. Cole glanced at her. Claire tilted her head toward the door. Cole nodded once. Claire left. She went back to the 5th floor because that was where Ellie was, and Ellie was still the reason any of this mattered. The institutional machinery could process Crane's testimony without her. What it could not do was sit with a 22-year-old girl at 7:40 in the morning and be a human being in the room with her. Ellie was awake, fully upright, her father beside her, both of them with coffee that one of the aides had produced from somewhere. The room had shifted in tone from the crisis hours of the night, not relaxed. Nothing about this situation allowed relaxed, but settled into something that had ground under it instead of air. Weston looked up when Claire entered. Crane's talking? Yes, sir. Kowalski? In custody, hasn't said anything yet. Weston nodded. He had the look of a man running parallel processes, the personal one involving his daughter, and the professional one involving 30 years of institutional trust being systematically revised. Marsh. Cole's team is coordinating with the Joint Chiefs Liaison. The override I filed at 517 has created a paper trail he can't step around. He can issue counter-authorizations, but they'll be visible now. And visible is what Cole needs. Claire paused. He's going to try to manage the optics, position himself as someone who issued an administrative hold for procedural reasons, not obstruction. He'll claim he didn't know what Nash was doing. He'll claim it until the financial records say otherwise. Weston looked at the floor for a moment. Teddy Marsh and I came up through the same program. 31 years ago. He stood at my wedding. He said it without sentimentality, just a fact being placed on a table to be examined. I've recommended him for 2 postings. He's met my daughter. He stopped. He knew she was here. Yes, sir. He knew because the admission manifests go to his committee for resource allocation oversight. Weston's voice was very even. He knew she was in this hospital. He knew who held the supply contract, and he let it happen. Claire did not fill the silence. It didn't need filling. Ellie had been listening. She looked at her father with the directness of someone who has decided that careful language has cost her enough. Did he order it, or did he just not stop it? Weston looked at his daughter. I don't know yet. Because those are different things, Ellie said. Not stopping something you know about is still a choice, but I want to know if he sat somewhere and decided it was acceptable for me to spend 3 weeks screaming. Her voice was steady. That was the thing about Ellie Weston that Claire had understood from the first night. The steadiness was not absence of feeling. It was the shape feeling took in her when she was most serious about something. We'll find out, Claire said. Ellie looked at her. How? Before Claire could answer, her phone buzzed. Not an unknown number this time. Cole, come to the lobby, now. Bring General Weston. They took the elevator down, Weston and Claire and one of his aides. Cole was standing in the lobby with her colleague and 2 uniformed federal agents, and a man Claire had never seen before. Mid-50s, civilian clothes, carrying himself with the specific authority of someone who did not need a uniform to communicate rank. He looked at Weston and said, Douglas. Weston stopped walking. James. James Pryor. Claire didn't know the name, but she read the dynamic instantly. This was someone who sat above Weston in the actual chain, not the committee structure Nash had been using as cover, but the real chain. The one that moved when things became too large to contain within their original container. I got the authorization flag at 5:40 this morning, Pryor said. Drove up from Washington. He looked around the lobby with the particular assessment of a man cataloging a situation. Ted Marsh called me at 6:15. What did he say? Weston asked. He said you'd had a difficult night with your daughter and were making decisions outside your normal judgment. He asked me to review the override and consider suspending it pending a full committee evaluation. Pryor's expression did not change. I told him I'd look into it. And I've spent the last hour on the phone with NCIS headquarters and the Department of Defense Inspector General. Pryor looked at Cole. Your case summary is thorough, Agent Cole. Thank you, sir. It is also, if accurate, the most significant breach of military medical procurement integrity we've seen in 2 decades. He looked back at Weston. The override stands, the audit proceeds, and I've placed a hold on Marsh's committee access pending review, which he does not know yet. He paused. He will know within the hour when his security credentials stop working. Weston held Pryor's gaze. He was managing this for 12 years, James, inside the system, using the system. I know. People died. In Kandahar, Weston glanced at Claire. This nurse filed a report in 2014. It went to Marsh's desk and disappeared. Pryor looked at Claire with the full attention of someone recalibrating quickly. You're Harmon. Yes, sir. Your report is in the NCIS case file. I read it this morning. He said it without elaboration, which was its own kind of acknowledgement. Two soldiers, Corporal James Reardon and Specialist Dana Voss, Claire said. Their names lived in a part of her that had never gotten quieter about them. The pressure monitors on their stretchers failed during transport after an IED incident. They were stable when they were loaded. The monitor failures meant nobody caught the deterioration in time. Pryor was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry." "With respect, sir, sorry is insufficient." "Yes," he said, "it is." He looked at Cole. "What do you need from me to close this case completely?" Cole's answer was precise and took 4 minutes to deliver. She needed Pryor's authorization for full access to Nash Defense Technologies' federal contract records going back 15 years. She needed a freeze on Nash's current contracts pending audit completion. She needed the 3 other girls' medical records formally subpoenaed so their cases could be reopened and properly documented. And she needed the committee's financial records, the ones Marsh controlled, cross-referenced against Nash's payment structures to build the timeline of how long the protection had been running and how much it had cost. Pryor authorized everything standing in the lobby without a desk or a computer, from memory and authority, the way people make decisions when the decisions have been building for long enough that the moment of making them is really just the moment of acknowledging what was already true. Nash was arrested at his Virginia office at 9:17 that morning. Claire heard about it from Cole, who delivered the information between calls with the economy of someone managing 15 things simultaneously. Nash had been in a meeting with 2 lawyers when federal agents came through the door. He had said nothing. His lawyers had said a great deal. The lawyers were still talking and would continue talking for months, possibly years, while the evidence Cole's team had assembled spent that same time building a structure around Gerald Nash that his lawyers would not be able to take apart. Raymond Kowalski started talking at 9:45. The decision was sudden and total, the way decisions are when someone does the math on their situation and finds that the numbers only work in one direction. He gave names, dates, payment structures, the specific mechanism by which modified pillows had been substituted into military wing linen deliveries across 4 facilities. He described the flagging system, a simple color-coded sticker on the delivery manifest, visible only to the receiving dock coordinator, that indicated which room assignment required a modified unit. He described having done this 14 times across 4 hospitals over 3 years. He described being paid through a consulting arrangement with a Nash subsidiary that would have looked to any casual audit like legitimate procurement consulting. When Cole read the summary to Claire at 10 in the morning, standing in the corridor outside 517, Claire's first question was not about Nash or Kowalski or the mechanism. "The other girls," she said, "the ones before Ellie, were any of them hurt permanently?" Cole's face did something careful. 2 recovered fully after discharge. 1 required ongoing treatment for anxiety that her family now believes was caused by the episodes rather than preceding them. The 4th, she stopped. The 4th was the one at Bethesda. Rear Admiral Sung's daughter. She was 19. After 6 weeks of inpatient psychiatric treatment, she was discharged on a medication protocol that took another year to unwind. She's 20 now. She's okay, but okay took a long time to become accurate. Claire absorbed that. Her father needs to know what was done to her. He'll be contacted today. He needs to hear it from a person, not a form letter. Cole looked at her. "I know." A pause. "I'll call him myself." Marsh was placed under formal investigation at 11 in the morning. The notification went to his office by secured federal communication. Cole told Claire that his response, according to the agent who delivered it, had been to read the document twice, set it down on his desk and say, "I'd like to call my attorney," which was, Cole noted, the correct legal response, and also the response of a man who had known this moment was possible and had a number ready. What Marsh had not been ready for was the press. By 11:30, the Washington Post had a story online. By noon, 3 television networks had crews outside Harborview. By 1 in the afternoon, the story had a shape that was legible to anyone paying attention. Military contractor, fake medical crises, daughters of officers targeted to delay audits, federal investigation, arrests, and at the center of it, a part-time night nurse who had cut open a pillow and refused to put the evidence back down. Claire did not talk to the press. Cole had asked her not to, and she didn't need to be asked twice. What she needed, after 9 hours without sleep, and the particular exhaustion of a night that had asked everything of her and received it, was to sit in a chair in room 517 and be a person rather than a participant. Ellie was watching the news on the small television mounted on the wall, the volume low, her father beside her. The coverage showed the exterior of Harborview, reporters gesturing at the building, the kind of journalism that existed to explain a story to people who didn't know it yet. Ellie watched it with a complicated expression of someone watching their own experience become a public narrative, which was not the same experience at all. "They keep saying patient," Ellie said. "They won't say my name yet." "They'll say it eventually," Weston said. "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "I don't mind. I just want them to say it accurately. Not the general's daughter who had a breakdown. Not the girl who was imagining things." She looked at the television. The girl who was right. Claire looked at her. "That's what they'll say." "How do you know?" "Because you have your father, a federal agent, a federal investigation, and 3 recorded confessions backing you up." Claire paused. "And because the truth, when it finally gets moving, is hard to mischaracterize." Ellie smiled. It was small and tired and real. "You stayed," she said. "Last night when everyone else left. You stayed and you looked. You told me to look at the pillow. I'd told 15 other people to look at the pillow. Then 15 other people made a mistake," Claire said simply. Weston was looking at her. He had been looking at her with the same measured attention for most of the morning, the recalibration she had noticed earlier still running somewhere behind his eyes. "What happens to you now?" he asked. Claire considered the question. What happened to her now was a federal case that would take months and possibly years to reach its conclusion. What happened to her now was testimony and depositions and the careful architecture of accountability being built around people who had believed they were untouchable. What happened to her now was the end of invisibility, which she had chosen 5 years ago and maintained with discipline, and which had ended at 2:47 in the morning when a girl screamed and she walked toward it instead of away. "I give my statement," she said. "I testify when they need me to. I go back to work." "Here?" Weston asked. "Somewhere." She looked at her badge, the part-time designation printed underneath her name in small letters. The part-time part might be negotiable at this point. Weston reached into his jacket pocket and took out a card. He held it out to her across the bed. "When this is over, when the case is built and the testimony is given, and you're ready to think about what comes next, call that number." Claire took the card. She didn't look at it. "What is it?" "A conversation," he said, "about what someone with your background and your particular way of looking at things might do with a slightly larger platform." He paused. "You found something that 4 federal investigators, 3 attending physicians, and 17 years of hospital administration missed. I'm not interested in that going back to part-time nights." Claire looked at the card, then at Ellie, who was watching her with the particular attention of someone who already knew what the card said. "Dad's been on the phone with the Surgeon General's office since 7 this morning," Ellie said. Weston did not deny it. Claire looked at the card one more time. Then she put it in her pocket, next to her phone, next to the photograph she had taken in a supply closet at 3 in the morning of 3 small devices that had changed the direction of more lives than she could yet count. "Like I said," she said, "one thing at a time." Her phone buzzed. "Cole, come to the server room. There's something in the recovered data you need to see. The deletion that Morrow ran, the 37% he got through before you stopped him. Forensics reconstructed most of it. There are names in there that aren't on our list yet. One of them is going to matter to you specifically. Claire read it twice. Then she stood up, straightened her scrubs, and went to find out what she had been close to for 5 years without knowing it. The server room was quieter than it had been at 4 in the morning. The forensic team had done their work and reduced their footprint to 2 agents and a laptop, the efficient aftermath of people who had gotten what they came for. Cole was standing at the terminal where Morrow had been running the deletion, her arms crossed, her expression carrying the particular focus of someone who has found something they were not expecting. She looked up when Claire came through the door. "Close it behind you." Claire did. Cole turned the laptop around. On the screen was a reconstructed file, partial, with gaps where the deletion had progressed too far to recover, but intact enough to be legible. It was a communication log, internal, encrypted, routed through a server address that Cole's colleague had already identified as a Nash Defense Technologies subsidiary relay. The communications were brief, operational, the language of people who had done this before and had no reason to be elaborate about it. Claire read the first entry, then the second. Then she stopped at the third and read it twice. The name in the third entry was not Gerald Nash. It was not Raymond Kowalski. It was not Ben Morrow or anyone else who had been named in the previous 12 hours. It was a name she recognized from a context so far removed from Harborview Naval Medical Center that it took her brain 3 full seconds to connect the 2 realities. Dr. Sandra Reeve, Chief of Military Medical Oversight, Eastern Region. The officer who had received Claire's report from Kandahar in 2014 and forwarded it to General Marsh's desk with a recommendation for expedited review and a notation that read, in the dry language of bureaucratic disposal, matter appears consistent with existing field equipment variance protocols. Reeve had not buried the report. She had gift-wrapped it and handed it to the person who would. "She's been in the network since before Kandahar," Cole said. "The communication log shows contact between Reeve and Nash going back 16 years. She wasn't Marsh's subordinate. She was his parallel. They ran 2 separate pipelines. Marsh controlled the committee structure and the financial oversight. Reeve controlled the medical side. Which facilities received Nash contracts? Which medical staff got assigned to military-adjacent wings? Which diagnoses became institutional standard for patients who needed to become institutional problems?" Claire looked at the screen. She reviewed every incoming report that came through military medical channels in the Eastern region. For 14 years, which means she knew about every case before Ellie, not just Kandahar, all of it. Every device deployment, every patient targeted, every father who pulled back from a financial review because his daughter was falling apart in a hospital room. Cole's voice was controlled, but the control was doing visible work. She is the reason none of it ever surfaced, not because she was passive, because she was active. She read the signals, identified the risk, and redirected anything that got close. Where is she now? Her office issued a statement at 8 this morning saying she was taking medical leave effective immediately for personal health reasons. Cole looked at her, which means someone warned her. Before the arrests, before the press, before the authorization chain reached her level, someone in the first hour of this morning made a call we haven't traced yet, and Sandra Reeve started running before we knew she needed to. Claire thought about the 4 words on her phone at 5 in the morning. "We know you're there." Not a threat, a communication. Someone inside the response chain telling Nash's network exactly what was happening at Harborview in real time, while Cole was still setting up her operations center on the 5th floor. "There's someone else," Claire said. "Yes, someone who was in this building tonight, someone who had enough access to know what was happening, fast enough to warn Reeve before 6 in the morning." Cole nodded once. "We have 4 candidates based on communication access in timeline. We're running them now." She paused. "But I need you to understand something about Sandra Reeve before we go further. Because it changes the shape of your testimony. Cole turned away from the laptop. Your report from Kandahar, Corporal Reardon and Specialist Voss. Reeve didn't just forward that report to Marsh, she annotated it first. In her annotation, she characterized you specifically. She wrote that the reporting officer demonstrated a pattern of escalatory complaint behavior inconsistent with command culture, and recommended that the report be reviewed in the context of the officer's overall fitness evaluation. The room was very quiet. She tried to make me the problem, Claire said. She succeeded for 10 years. Cole's voice did not soften the fact. That annotation is the reason your report disappeared. It's the reason you were offered early discharge instead of a formal review process. It reframed your documentation of 2 soldiers' deaths as the behavior of a difficult officer. And it did that before the report ever reached anyone who might have acted on it honestly. Claire stood with that for a moment. 10 years of carrying the weight of 2 names, James Reardon and Dana Voss, and the particular guilt of a person who filed a report and watched it vanish, and spent years wondering if she had done it wrong, said it wrong, framed it in a way that failed them. That guilt had a different shape now. It was not smaller, but it had an address. It had a name. It had a woman who had deliberately, specifically, with professional precision, turned Claire's act of accountability into evidence against her. Is Reeve the one who's been sending the texts? Claire asked. We don't think so. The texts have Nash's operational fingerprints. Reeve is more careful than that. Cole looked at her directly. I'm telling you this because when you testify, they're going to use Reeve's annotation. Her defense, and Nash's defense, will argue that your findings at Harborview were motivated by a decade-old grievance, and that your characterization of the evidence was shaped by personal bias. She paused. I need you ready for that. I've been ready for that since I was 29 years old and someone handed me a discharge offer instead of an investigation, Claire said. Being called a difficult woman with a grievance is not new territory. Cole looked at her for a moment with something that was not quite a smile and not quite admiration, but lived somewhere between them. No, she said, I don't imagine it is. They went back upstairs. The 5th floor had changed again in the hour Claire had been gone. The media presence outside the building had grown large enough that hospital administration had issued a formal statement. 3 paragraphs of careful language about cooperation with federal authorities and commitment to patient safety that said nothing specific and meant less. 2 of the staff members who had been on shift during the night were being interviewed separately by Cole's agents in rooms Claire passed on her way back to 517. Marcus from the original night staff was sitting in a chair outside the 3rd interview room with his hands on his knees and the expression of someone waiting to find out how much trouble the last 12 hours had cost him. He looked up when Claire walked by. Did I make a mistake? He asked. Last night, when I didn't go into the room. Claire stopped. She looked at him. Marcus was 28, 2 years into his career, working a floor where the patients had enough influence to shape what happened to the staff who cared for them. He had stood in that doorway and not moved, and she had pushed past him, and she had been furious about it in the wordless way of someone who didn't have time for fury. You didn't do what needed doing, she said. That's not the same as making a mistake. A mistake is when you do the wrong thing without knowing better. She paused. Next time, you'll know better. He nodded slowly. It wasn't absolution. It was something more useful than absolution. It was direction. Claire went to Ellie's room. Ellie was not alone. Nora Banks was there, sitting in the chair beside the bed where Claire had spent the previous night. And the 2 of them were in the middle of a conversation that stopped when Claire entered. Not because it was private, but because it had reached a natural pause. Nora looked up with the expression of someone who had been doing the harder thing for the last hour and was finding it less terrible than anticipated. I was telling her about the other cases, Nora said. The ones I documented. Claire looked at Ellie. Was that okay? Yes, Ellie's voice was steady. I wanted to know. I needed to know I wasn't the only one. She paused. And I needed to know they were okay. Most of them are okay, Nora said carefully. 2 fully recovered. 1 is still in process. She looked at her hands. I should have done something with what I had a year ago. I knew the pattern was wrong. She stopped. You were afraid, Ellie said, not as an accusation, as a fact being accepted rather than judged. Yes. So was my father, Ellie said. He was afraid I was losing my mind the same way he lost my mother. He stopped listening because listening was too frightening. She was quiet for a moment. I understand being afraid. I was afraid for 3 weeks that they were right about me. She looked at Claire. The difference is, you. I was afraid too, Claire said. Ellie looked at her with the directness that had been present since the first night. Of what? Of being wrong. Of being the difficult woman with a grievance that they'd already decided I was. Claire sat down on the edge of the bed. Of going through Kandahar again. Filing a report, watching it disappear, losing everything and having it count for nothing. But you did it anyway. You were in pain, Claire said simply. That was a fact. Everything else was noise. The room held that for a moment. Then Cole appeared in the doorway. She looked at Claire with an expression that had shifted again, faster than Claire had seen it shift before, and that shift meant something new had broken open somewhere in the building. We have the 4th name, Cole said. They went to the corridor. Cole spoke quietly and fast. The 4th candidate, the person who had warned Sandra Reeve from inside Harborview in the first hour of the morning, had been identified through a single outgoing call made at 5:42 from an internal hospital line to a number registered to a consulting firm in McLean, Virginia, that was 2 corporate layers from Nash Defense Technologies. The call had lasted 4 minutes. The line had been cleared by the time Cole's team traced it, but the extension it originated from was logged in the hospital's phone system automatically, and the extension belonged to the office of Dr. James Whitfield, Harborview's chief of staff, who had been at the hospital since 4 in the morning, who had attended every administrative briefing Cole had run, who had stood in the room when Cole described the devices to General Weston, and who had said nothing, contributed nothing, asked nothing, with the perfect stillness of a man who already knew everything being said. He's been on Nash's payroll through the consulting firm for 6 years, Cole said. We found it in the financial reconstruction from the server room data, quarterly payments, consulting designation, amounts consistent with the kind of access fee you pay someone who can ensure a specific hospital's supply contracts stay favorable and any inconvenient reviews get administratively slowed. She paused. He was the one who approved Kowalski's vendor switch 8 months ago. He signed the authorization. Where is he now? Claire asked. His office. 2 agents are with him. Cole looked at her. I wanted you to know before we move to formal arrest because his lawyer is already here, and he's going to spend the next 20 minutes claiming that the consulting payments were legitimate and that the call to McLean was routine business. He's going to be smooth about it. She paused. And then I'm going to show him the server room data and watch him stop being smooth. Claire looked down the corridor toward the administrative wing. A man had sat in every room where this case was being built this morning and fed its coordinates to the people it was being built against. And he had done it with the practiced ease of someone who had been managing 2 realities simultaneously for 6 years and found the management routine. Will it hold? Claire asked. The case, with Reeve running and Whitfield lawyered up. Nash is in federal custody. Kowalski has given a full confession. Morrow attempted to destroy evidence on federal warrant, which is its own case. The financial records from the server room tie Nash to 14 device deployments across 4 facilities. Reeve is running, which is its own testimony. Cole's voice was certain in the specific way of someone who has built cases before and knows when the foundation is solid. It holds. Whitfield was arrested at 12:40 in the afternoon. Claire did not watch it happen. She was on the phone in the conference room, giving her formal statement to an NCIS recording system while a transcription agent typed, and the arrest was a sound in the corridor, and then a silence. And the silence meant it was done. Her statement took 2 hours. She described every moment from 11 o'clock the previous night with the precision of someone who had trained herself to observe details because details kept people alive. She described the weight of the pillow. She described the devices, their construction, the angles of the pressure prongs. She described Morrow's arrival speed and its implication. She described the server room and the 63% deletion bar. She described Nora Banks and the USB drive and everything Nora had said in the supply closet at 3 in the morning. When she reached the part about Kandahar, she did not hesitate. She said the names: James Reardon, Dana Voss. She said the date. She described the pressure monitors in the failure and what she had found in the equipment specifications that told her the failure was not random. She said that she had filed a formal report and been offered a discharge and taken it because staying had cost her the ability to do the work she had come there to do. She said that she had come to Harborview 5 years ago because she needed to be close to the source of what had happened, and she had not known at the time whether that was intelligence or just grief that had no other direction to go. The transcription agent stopped typing once, briefly, and then continued. The NCIS recorder did not stop. When she finished, the agent across the table looked at her for a moment before he said anything. Then he said, "For the record, Miss Harmon, your 2014 report has been formally reopened by the Department of Defense Inspector General as of 9:15 this morning. The annotation that characterized your conduct has been flagged as potentially fraudulent and is under review." He paused. "I thought you should hear that in the room where you told it." Claire looked at the table. She had spent 10 years carrying a version of that report that included Sandra Reeves' annotation as a permanent feature of the landscape, a characterization she had neither agreed with nor been able to remove. She had built invisibility around it like a wall. "Thank you," she said. The words were small. They were not insufficient. General Weston found her in the corridor at 3 in the afternoon. He had the card in his hand, the one she had put in her pocket that morning, and he turned it over once the way people handle objects they have been thinking about. "I spoke with James Pryor again an hour ago," he said. "The Surgeon General's office has been in contact. There's a formal review process beginning for all military-adjacent medical facilities under Nash contract. 14 hospitals. They need someone who understands both the clinical side and the oversight failure. Someone who will look at what's actually there rather than what the institution wants to be there." Claire looked at the card. "It's not a nursing position," Weston said. "It's an investigative consultant role with federal standing. You would have access to patient records, supply chains, staff communications. You would have the authority to flag, halt, and escalate." He paused. "You would be visible, officially, formally, with credentials that make it impossible for anyone to call you a part-time nobody who cut open a pillow without authorization." "The part-time nobody who cut open a pillow without authorization is the reason any of this happened," Claire said. "Yes." His voice was direct and without decoration. "That's why I want her doing it with a federal badge instead of trauma shears." Claire looked at him. Then she looked at the door to 517, 20 feet down the corridor, where his daughter was on the phone with someone from Georgetown, arranging her return to campus for the spring semester. Because the girl who had spent 3 weeks being told her pain was imaginary had decided, in the clear light of the morning after, that she was not going to let those 3 weeks define the next 4 years. She took the card from his hand. She looked at it. Her name was not on it yet. It was just a number and an office designation and the weight of a decision that would end the careful invisibility she had constructed and maintained, and which had served its purpose and was now, finally, finished. "Reardon and Voss," she said. Weston looked at her. "When this is built and the testimony is given and the case is closed," she said, I want their names in the official record, not a footnote, not a parenthetical reference to a 2014 field equipment incident. Their names, their rank, what happened, and the fact that someone filed a report that was buried by the people this investigation is prosecuting. She held his gaze. That's the condition. Weston did not hesitate. Done. Claire put the card in her pocket. She walked back to 517 and pushed open the door, and Ellie looked up from her phone with the expression of someone who has been waiting to find out what the answer was. She read it in Claire's face before a word was spoken, the way people read things in faces when they have been paying close enough attention to what a face looks like when it's carrying something versus when it has put something down. You said yes, Ellie said. I said yes. Ellie smiled. It was not small this time. It was not tired. It was the smile of a girl who had screamed in the dark for 3 weeks and been told the dark was in her head, and who now had the particular brightness of someone standing in morning light that is real and earned and not going away. Nora appeared in the doorway behind Claire, still carrying a chart, still doing the work of the floor with the steadiness of someone who has chosen a direction and is walking it without looking back. She looked at the two of them and said nothing, which was the right amount. Outside, the press was still there. The cameras were still rolling. The story was still building its public shape, and it would continue building for months and years, through trials and testimony, and the slow institutional reckoning of a system confronting what it had allowed to grow inside itself for over a decade. But in room 517 of Harborview Naval Medical Center, on an ordinary morning that had arrived at the far end of the longest night, the important thing had already happened. A girl who had been told her pain was not real had been proven right. A woman who had been told her voice was not credible had been proven right. And 2 soldiers who had died in a field in Afghanistan because a man in a comfortable office decided their lives were an acceptable cost of doing business had finally, 10 years and 1 open pillow later, been given what they had always deserved. The truth, said out loud, in a room where someone was listening. Claire Harmon had spent 5 years making herself invisible so she could survive. She spent the rest of them making sure no one else had to.